The wise old owl who sat on the oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. The first time I heard that tale, I was 8 years old, and it stayed with me as a formative part of my childhood. Now, over 2 decades later, it's still sitting with me from the oak tree of the owl to the office of educational leadership. And today, I'm going to talk to you about why it's been such a formative part of my life. So my 8-year-old self, when I walked into the kitchen one day, I saw my dad sitting at the table, kitchen scissors in hand, cutting out a very small square from the top left-hand side of the newspaper. He looked at me in his way and he said, "Teagan, this is an important one." I probably rolled my eyes, knowing my 8-year-old self, internally, perhaps not externally, and thought, okay, it's another one of Dad's sayings or quotes. He was always handing me things on a piece of paper and saying that this was going to be important. Later that afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and I saw this quote on a magnet up in the top left-hand corner of the fridge. I didn't think much of it again. And it wasn't until a few short weeks later, when I was sitting at the dinner table, telling my family about how I was going to solve the problems of the world, hard to believe for those who know me, coming up with all of the issues of the day and how I could solve them. Dad said to me, "Stand up, come with me." He gently guided me in his way and stood me in front of the fridge, hands on the tops of my shoulders, and he said, "Let's read this together." The wise old owl who sat on the oak, we read together. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. I turned to my dad and I said, "Dad, owls can be women too." And he said, "Yes, darling, they can." It's not quite the message I was hoping you would take from that. But what I did take was, okay, I need to stop talking and I need to listen. So today I'm going to share with you how my 8-year-old self, hearing this poem for the first time, has taken the learnings of the owl from the oak tree and now to the Office of Educational Leadership. So the 4 lessons I'm going to share with you today capture how I embody or try to embody the owl. Lesson 1. Perspective is everything. We need to zoom out like the owl and sit high on the branch. The owl doesn't sit in the midst of chaos. Schools are busy places. Staff issues, parent emails, student incidences, emergencies, evacuations, policy implementation, strategy change, the list goes on. But for us to be able to make sure that we can cut through to the heart of what matters, we need to zoom out. And we need to gain perspective. And it's not unless we do that that we can make meaningful change. Lesson number 2, speak less and listen more. I used to think it was important to have the loudest voice in the room. It was important to make sure that my point was clear. But now what I know to be the case is that it's not about always being the loudest. It is about letting other people speak, letting other people have a genuine voice and seat at the table. Not too long ago, a colleague of mine was sitting in my office. She'd had a really tough day and started telling me about this issue that she was facing. In my mind, I jumped to all of the solutions, all of the strategizing and all of the options that I could provide for her. But I heard the owl on one shoulder and my dad on the other. "Listen, Teagan," said the owl in my dad's voice, funnily enough. Truly listen. I stopped thinking about the options, the strategy lists, the to-do lists for the day, what meeting was on the next time, and I stopped and I listened. And before I could start to wrap up the meeting with my colleague, she turned to me and she said, "Thank you. All I needed today was to be heard." I ran into my colleague a few weeks later and she told me how she solved her problem, and it was much better than anything I could have come up with. Lesson 3, there is strength in stillness. The bird and the owl doesn't sit in the midst of chaos. It rises above it, and it's calm and still. For us in schools, tragedy, unfortunately, and crises are inevitable, regardless of what that is. And we need to be able to weather the storm as educational leaders. We can't necessarily carry the weather with us, but we need to be able to be still and calm in moments of chaos. We need to be able to be that voice of reason, to make reasoned decisions and make reasoned judgments. I certainly know that I've never made a good decision when I've reacted. I make good decisions when I stop, when I'm calm, and when I step back. So I know in times like that, I need to embody the owl, to be still and to be calm and to be a level head. And my fourth and final lesson is that there is wisdom in the echo. It's not necessarily what people do when we're in the room that counts, but it is how they lead when, not when, things are mandated to them, but when it is modelled. We can't always see the owl, but we know that they are there. So, for me, educational leadership is not about having all the answers. It's not about telling people how to do their role. It's not about being the smartest or the wisest person in the room. But it is about gaining perspective and zooming out. It is about weathering the storm. It's about genuinely and authentically listening. And it's about leaving a legacy that will outlive our title. The wise old owl who sat on the oak. The more she heard, the less she spoke. The less she spoke, the more she heard. That's the kind of leader that our schools, our people, and our world today needs right now, more than ever before. So how will you be more like the owl? Thank you.